Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on starting off strong, professional workplace success. My name is Chris Hawks. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, or RPCV, who served in Belize from 2010 to 12. And I have the pleasure of being joined today by my colleague, Eric Powell. Hello, Eric.
Hello, Chris. Great to be with you today. As Chris said, my name is Eric Powell, and I'm also a training specialist with AmeriCorps headquarters. And I also have service experience, having served as a VISTA member in 2006 and a VISTA leader in 2008. And I'm very, very happy to be here today to talk about starting your year of service off strong.
Thanks, Eric. Now, today, just looking at our agenda, we're going to identify four strategies to help Vista start their year successfully. We'll provide ideas to support these strategies. We'll also plan for action at your site to ensure your own successful start. Then we'll finish our time together today with a short Q&A session, and we hope you will leave with some tools to use in your Vista service, some resources, some links that we'll share that are also included in the handout. We'll also share a link to the handout now and a couple times throughout the session that we will use during today's session. It has some key concepts and links, and we'll touch on those during the webinar. If you're not able to access the webinar, or I'm sorry, if you're not able to access the handout at the moment, that's perfectly fine. It's not required or anything, but it is helpful, and we will reference it a few times. So with that, let's get started, and I'll pass it to Eric to introduce our four strategies.
Thank you, Chris. I'll start by saying the first few months in any new position are critical. I know that from my current position and from when I served as a VISTA member. And when you're a VISTA and potentially only have 1 year at your service site, these first months are even more important. Whether you're just getting started in your new VISTA role, or maybe you're ending service and you're about to begin a new career, starting off strong is all about setting yourself up for success. Today, we're going to review four strategies that can help lead you to a strong start at your site. First, seek information, really diving into learning about your project and your new role. Second, make connections and build relationships. That'll help you really build trust with your community. Third, we want you to identify assets. Every community and every VISTA placement has identifiable assets that you should be aware of. And finally, clarify your VISTA assignment and project tasks, because it's really, really important for you to be clear about what it is you are aiming to accomplish. You probably remember from a few minutes ago in our opening chat question, we asked you to share one specific thing that you do to ensure a successful start to your year of service. Many of the actions that we saw in the chat and that you mentioned fall into these four categories. And I'll pass it over to, we're going to move on now to talk about action planning. So as we move through each of these strategies, we're going to give you some time to identify specific actions that you can take at your site after this webinar via a companion handout that Chris just mentioned a few minutes ago. So on the screen, you can see a zoomed out image, just so you can briefly recognize the first page of the handout. Don't worry, you don't have to read every word on the screen. You can download the handout. So we do encourage you to open up the companion handout. You'll be able to access it via a link in the chat, and we'll give you time to fill it out as we go throughout today's webinar. So as you're clicking on the link and downloading the handout, I'm going to pass it back to Chris to talk about our first strategy.
Thanks, Eric. So, as Eric mentioned, our first strategy that we'll look at is seeking information. And actually saw a few of you mention that in the first chat response in terms of seeking information was one of the first things you did. Now, seeking information is about being a self-guided professional, really. While your site supervisor, and other Vistas all have a responsibility to get you up to speed and plugged in, you should also be taking leadership and learning about your project site and your new role. Now, there are several things you can seek out that could potentially be very helpful. I find it helpful to use examples to illustrate concepts. I think it makes more practical sense for my brain to absorb. So let's take a look at a scenario to get your thoughts. With this scenario, we have Charlene. Charlene was just onboarded for her service with the Veterans Resource Center and will start service next week. She doesn't have any prior experience with this agency or in supporting veterans, and she is not a veteran herself. So far, she's met her site supervisor and one other Vista serving at the agency, but Charlene has never worked in an office setting before and isn't sure what is expected of her. She's also not sure if her new colleagues understand her role as a Vista member, and she's really nervous about her first week. So I'm interested how you all would advise Charlene here. Obviously, we want to welcome Charlene to the Vista family and really ensure she starts off strong. So, what are some actions that Charlene could take to seek out additional information that will make her feel better prepared for her first week of service? So go ahead and start putting your thoughts into the chat. As you know, and as you've seen on these webinars, the chat can go fast, so we may not be able to go read through everyone's response, but we'd love to get your ideas. Saw some of these ideas actually in the opening chat question that some of you undertook yourself to really seek information. And a friendly reminder, when you put your thoughts into the chat, be sure you're choosing to you might have to toggle it so that your response goes to everyone instead of just hosts and panelists. So it looks like some are already coming in. Bear with me a second. So Anne Marie mentions read the staff handbook manual. Love it. Talk to your boss. Review the VAD and ask questions, says Veronica. Always ask questions. Yes, don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what your supervisor is there for. Let's see. You make sure you meet with your site supervisor. Yes, we'll touch on that in a second. Setting up meetings, research veteran agencies in our area. I love that response, Lisa. Yeah, especially since in this scenario, Charlene doesn't have experience with supporting veterans. Let's see. Be willing to ask for help. Talk to previous or current Vista members at the Veterans Resource Center. Yes, absolutely. That I know not every Vista site has additional Vista members. Some of you are working alone. There are other Vistas there. For some, you may have had previous Vista members that you can maybe access their information that they passed on, and others may have current Vista members working alongside of you that could be helpful. But these are great. Thank you for these responses. Please keep them coming. And actually, we're going to touch on a few of these responses that you mentioned. Before doing that, we have a quick poll question. So, a quick reflection activity related to seeking out information at your site. So, for each of the statements in the poll, select all that you agree with. So, you can select multiple here if you'd like, where the answer responses are I understand and can articulate the mission of my Vista project site. Second, I know where to find my site's policies and procedures manual or handbook. And third, I know where to find the Vista member handbook on the AmeriCorps.gov website. So we'll just give it a moment. It looks like many responses already coming in, but still a few to go. So I want to give everyone a chance to respond. Give it about 5 more seconds. And yeah, we saw some of these someone mentioned specifically, review the handbook in our chat question just now. So yeah, this is perfect timing. Okay, let's close it out. Okay, so this is really great that you can 89%, almost 90% can articulate the mission of your project site. That's excellent and very good to do. Um, the last one, also about 90% on finding the Vista member handbook. Yes, if you're part of the 9% who can't access it, let us know. We'll gladly send you a link and help you find where the Vista member handbook is. We want to make sure you are able to access that if you need it. And then in the second one, looks like that was a little bit less about knowing where to find my site's policies and procedures manual or handbook. And I know that can vary from site to site. Some may recommend using that during your first couple of weeks and like kind of put it in front of your face to review. Others may not use it as much, and it might be a little more difficult to find, but so that's understandable where that's a little bit less. But thanks for responding and your participation there. And that's good to know, good information, and appreciate your thoughts too in the chat question. So be sure to scoop up what you like from your colleagues that we don't cover here as well from those chat responses. And it's important that you start to learn about your issue of focus. So, looking at issue of focus, by that I mean, what is your primary area of service? Is it education? Is it economic opportunity, disaster services, environmental stewardship, healthy futures, or veterans and military families, like the example with Charlene? Whatever you're focused on this year, you should become as expert in that area as you can. So start reading about the issue, ask your site for any key data or information they use to communicate the issue. Who are the leading organizations thinking about and working on this issue, either nationally or within the community? And then sign up for their email newsletters, and check out their websites and look at their publications. Another important piece of information you should seek out are your organization's policies for doing work. So, every workplace has HR, finance, and other policies that govern your day-to-day work. Some good things to figure out might be spending and purchasing policies that will help you figure out how to buy things you need for your year of service for where it may be appropriate. Contract guidelines are another great policy to figure out. I know in some organizations, there may only be one person allowed to sign contracts. So this helps ensure that they know what's going on in a smaller organization. And also that kind of provides less risk for staff members and volunteers to spread out that responsibility. Your organization may have a policy manual to review in that regard. Now, every organization has systems and procedures for work and service as well. So how do you request a payment to be made? What do you do if there is a complaint from a client? How do we track data? How do you use the software your organization relies on, especially if it's continually changing? These are great questions to ask your supervisor or find the information when starting out. And this will help you jump right in and start serving alongside the staff. Now, finally, you should all be very familiar with VISTA guidelines. So please visit the VISTA campus and AmeriCorps.gov, and you will see a ton of information about what is appropriate and inappropriate activity as a national service member. All of this information has been provided to you in VMO or VISTA member orientation. So you may have it in your possession already. It's helpful when specific situations pop up in the middle of the year to really have this information at your fingertips. Like questions like, can I work with a religious organization? Can I go to this protest or that protest? Can I register people to vote? Definitely an important question during an election year. Or presidential election year, I guess I should say. But I've seen all these types of questions come up in the Vista year. We get those emails come in asking these questions, and the Vista member guidelines, the Vista member handbook is a very helpful tool there. Also on the Vista campus with the civil rights course that you took at the beginning of your service. If you need a refresher, that's very helpful as well. Now, after considering some of these possible actions, we want to give you a moment to pause and reflect again. And we want to know, what additional information do you need to seek out at your site to feel better prepared? So yeah, think about your specific project. What additional information would you want or need to feel better prepared? So we like you to open up, if you have access to the handout, to open up the first page. And there you can identify one action step you can take after this webinar related to seeking out information. So we're going to pause for about a minute so that you can fill that out. Or again, if you don't have access to the handout, please just feel free to type your responses in the chat, and we'll come back in just a moment. Okay, we'll start to wrap this up, but seeing some responses come in the chat, and please keep those coming. Did see a note about not being able to access the document. Yet you may need to be signed into the Vista campus to access it through the link, but we also dropped in a copy that you can download directly from Zoom if you'd like to click to open. But great responses coming in and much appreciated. Some good ideas, and hopefully these are items that you will take as an action step afterwards. Looking at goals they want me to accomplish while there. Yes, Shauna, and I assume that's, not necessarily the goals outlined in your VED, but something, maybe that the supervisor has in mind for your year of service. I read the opioid settlement grants. So the grant that you were rewarded, and reviewed which projects we are involved in and how data is collected and reported. That's great, Rochelle. That sounds like you already did that, which is a great item. Now it may have to be something that you have to touch up on from time to time to check which projects are involved, to circle back, check with them. So that could definitely be a good action step. Seeing other similar ones to what Rochelle mentioned, kind of visiting various sites run by the organization. So getting to know other sites that your organization maybe works with or in the community. Definitely, definitely. More online trainings. Let's see. A note from Nadia about set up a meeting with my supervisor. Yes, we absolutely hope that if you don't already have weekly or regularly scheduled meetings with your supervisor, that could be an action step afterwards. So these are great. Thanks so much for these responses, and I will pass it to Eric for our second strategy.
Yes, and I'm extremely excited about this strategy because it's my all-time favorite about making connections and building relationships. So we'll start this one with a poll, and you'll see on the screen in just a minute, or if you're on your phone, you should be able to access it when it appears. And the question we're asking is, which statements below do you agree with? Again, you can select all that apply. One option is, I already have a one-on-one weekly meeting with my supervisor. Option B is, I understand my colleague's role at my site, meaning that you have other colleagues at your site and you really understand how they're involved with the VISTA project. And then option C is, I know key contacts at our community partners, especially if you're involved with your community partners or maybe you've already reached out to some of them. We'll give you a few more seconds. I see a lot of responses coming in. And as a reminder, you can select all that apply. So if all three apply to you, that's great. If only two apply or one, just select your response and click submit. Give you about 5 more seconds. It's great to see the excitement and the energy via the poll. So we will go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like most people already have a one-on-one meeting with their supervisor and understand their colleague's role at my site. And only about 50% already know the key contacts at their community partners. Well, that's okay because there's still plenty of time to get to know more community partners and build those contacts. So, speaking of contacts, building trust with the community is an essential part of national service because you cannot be successful without trust. The trust and that relationship that is most important to you during your year is with your supervisor. So we encourage you to first start learning about your supervisor's communication style. Specifically, what do they need to be successful and what are they hoping that you'll get from your year of service? Also, what are they hoping that they'll learn from you? A common thing that we hear from site supervisors is that when they are in sync with communicating with their members, they really succeed. When they weren't in sync, the year could be rough. I don't mean to say that all supervisors are great or that communication is the only key to success, but if you can make this relationship work, your year has a much better chance at success. If you don't already have a routine one on one check in meeting established, we encourage you to work with your supervisor to get one set up. It really makes all the difference. I know from my experience, it worked wonders. And this is an important opportunity to really learn about each other's work styles and communication preferences, as well as other details that you get to know about each other when you're working together. In your companion handout, we've included some sample relationship building questions that you can ask to learn more about each other. Now, you probably have other colleagues at your site, and those are very, very important. And they have a lot of support as well, including information providers and perhaps even friends for you to get to know during your year of service. Some sites also have other VISTA members. Some sites have really large teams, and some sites you might be just one of a very few number of people. Many of your new colleagues will have years of experience with your issue of focus and with the work your agency does. So building relationships with these folks will help you both professionally and personally. It's great to have a crew to back you up. Also, if there are colleagues at your site whose role you don't completely understand, take the time to learn about what they do and how their work relates to your project. Consider conducting a few informational interviews with colleagues to learn about their role and what led them to where they are today. Many of your VISTA assignment descriptions or VADs will call for building partnerships, whether formally or informally. And most of your agencies will have partnerships in place prior to your arrival. And sometimes you'll be asked to form new partnerships. Whichever is the case, get out and make those connections. Again, those help you both professionally and personally. Strength in partnerships means strength in activities that move your mission forward. And remember, as a VISTA member, you are called to build capacity, and create and maintain partnerships is definitely a good way to build capacity. So, stepping back and looking at it in more of a generic way, VISTA members really should make connections and build relationships with the community. I know that seems like a big task, of course, but you're not going to get to know everyone in the community. But in your year, you can embed yourself in the community and really meet some key leaders. You could join Kiwanis or Rotary, maybe visit the farmers market, and perhaps even find a young professionals meetup. Not only do you get to meet new people, but they also tend to have free food. I mean, I know I love food, so that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's always good for VISTA members who are living on the living allowance. Finally, and now that I think about it, this probably should have been first, we want you to get to know the population that your agency is serving. You're not doing direct service, but your capacity building is much more impactful if you understand where those served are coming from. If there are appropriate ways at your agency to interact with those served, take that opportunity and lean in. And after considering some of these possible actions, we do want to give you a moment to pause and reflect, just like we did a few moments ago. What relationships have you already started building that will support your year of service? What relationships or connections do you want to work on? So again, open your handout, and hopefully you already have it open somewhere, either printed or electronically. Look at page 2 and identify one specific action step that you can take after this webinar related to building relationships. Again, we'll give you about a minute or so and play some music. and feel free to enter your comments in the chat while we wait. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of really good comments coming in, and I do encourage you to continue writing these in your handout as well as sharing them in the chat. I'll read off just a few quickly. Jocelyn mentions start building community relationships at my site is one action step. Christina says connecting with the Vista campus. Marianne says getting to know my supervisor's communication style. A lot of conversations around getting to know my supervisor and really making that connection because, as we said, that's one of the most important relationships you can have as a Vista member. Isabel says attend the company professional development day. These are phenomenal, and I do encourage you on your own in your handout, think about how to get more specific. So if you plan on building relationships and if you plan on building relationships at your site, think about what specific detailed action step you can take as part of that to lead up to the overall relationship. So thank you for sharing these. These are wonderful to hear. And I'll pass it off to Chris to segue into our third category.
Thanks, Eric. And yeah, agreed. Great responses coming in the chat. So looking at our third strategy, it involves identifying assets. Now, you all have assets at your site, whether it's resources, people, programs, or partners. Every community and every Vista placement has identifiable assets that you should be aware of. Identifying assets is one of our strategies because we want to make sure we're entering a community with grace. We can't treat a community as if all they have is problems, and we certainly can't act like we're the heroes coming to save the day. Acknowledging assets tells a community that you see them, you see their strengths, you see them as more than their challenges. That helps you with building trust and relationships and makes your service that much richer and more impactful and really helps out if you have those assets. Secondly, identifying assets gives you a good place to start, really. If you get to your site and look around and think, what do I do? Where do I start? Well, the assets are a great place to do so. So if we look back at our scenario with Charlene and practice identifying assets here. So now in this example, Charlene is now a few weeks into her service year and has been learning a lot about veteran services. She has also started to build relationships with colleagues and community partners. Through those connections, she learns that there are several veterans on staff at her site and discovers that one of her coworkers is a previous VISTA member who got a job at the agency. When meeting with her supervisor, she learns that the agency just recently received a new grant to help expand programming at the organization. She also established contacts with some important community partners, including the VA hospital, the local PTSD support group, and the employment placement agency. While meeting with these partners, she discovers her organization has a very positive reputation in the community. So, going through these, I'm sure as I was speaking, you saw as many assets or heard as many assets in that scenario as I did. In the chat, please feel free to share any of the assets that you heard. This will be pretty quick and we can run through a few of these, but um, you know, uh, just notably, her site has a strong reputation in the community. The big one that really stood out to me was Charlene's site includes former veterans on staff and a former Vista on staff. That's a huge asset and could be very helpful for her Vista role. The new grant was mentioned, the PTSD support group. Yes, Shauna, great. Exactly. The partners with the VA hospital as well. Absolutely. So tons of assets there, and maybe they're not always, uh, easily identifiable right off the bat, but once you kind of take a step back and look, there are many assets there. And as we saw from that scenario, assets come in many shapes and sizes. One type of asset is community and organizational strengths. So if we look at strengths, what has helped hold the community together in times of crisis or challenge? What are the pillars that communities lean on for support? In New York, after 9/11, one of the strengths was spirit. The community and really the world rallied around the city. In Flint, Michigan, during the water crisis, which still is a problem, other communities brought water bottles into the residents. Local businesses offered water for free. If you have a library nearby, that is almost always a real safe haven for kids. It's a kind of a center of activity and it's an educational resource at the same time. So that's a great example of a strength in the community. So another type of asset is successes. So what successes has your agency or community had? Build from those rather than trying to create all new efforts. So, I mean, there are times where some programs, some nonprofits could flop and go down. That's the learning there is to move on to new ideas if their ideas or programs don't come to fruition. At times, a program may have some success, but could have been better. Instead of scrapping those efforts, seek feedback and build from what worked. And then for programs or activities that have been successful from the start, we can think about ways to leverage that win for more success and add on to it. Could we make the program bigger? Could we replicate it across town? Could we bring in more partners? These are ways of building from your assets, but of course, you have to identify those assets first. Remember, we're looking for what's working rather than looking for what's wrong with the community. So let's take another moment to pause and reflect. Again, in the handout, if you open it up, what assets have you already discovered at your site and in your community? So, um, this this can be something that you already have discovered at your site and your community, or you can identify one action step you can take after this webinar related to seeking out information. What do you want to seek out after this webinar? So again, we'll give it about a minute for you to complete this. Please feel free to drop your answer in the chat, and we'll be right back. All right. Thanks everyone for your responses. And please keep those coming in if you're mid typing or still mid reflecting in your handout as well. Please continue to contribute those to the chat And I encourage you to scroll up and look at your colleagues' responses because it could spark an idea for yourself as well. Christina mentioned, I'm going to create a sustainability document where I can add and change it. It will help a lot for any future members. Yes, absolutely. Several responses here talking about relationships and those strengths. Yeah, and tap into coworkers, community leaders, and your organization's partners, says Mia. Talk with your supervisor and check their website. Let's see. My supervisor is the CEO of the company, which makes it much easier for me to get approval. So yes, that's great, Mohammed. Yes, well, there are many Vista members. Yes, if you're at a smaller site, yeah, your supervisor may. There are some sites where the supervisor and yourself, are really the only two there. There are other sites that are monstrous and huge in size, so it really varies. But if you have someone who if your supervisor is the CEO, yes, they will be very valuable and have some information for you and certainly an asset. But the participatory asset mapping toolkit linked in the handout looks, oh, okay. Yes, Susan. Yes, definitely take a look at that, Susan. But thanks, yes, everyone for your responses. And now I will pass it to Eric for our fourth strategy.
Thanks, Chris. And it's a nice segue since I saw some people in the chat talking about their Vista assignment description. And this fourth strategy is on clarifying your Vista assignment. So we're going to have you do a quick reflection activity again. I'm sure you're familiar with the poll by now, so you'll see it appear on the screen. And again, we're asking which statements below you agree with. A, I understand the tasks in my Vista assignment description. B, I understand what previous Vista members have accomplished at my site. C, I know where to go to find resources to support my service tasks. Hopefully you at least can answer one of these. If not, well, there's still time and you're learning as a Vista member, which is great. But again, you can select multiple options, any of them that apply to you. As we talk about the Vista assignment description, the very important document that guides your service and keeps you on track with what tasks and responsibilities you are given as a VISTA member. So I'll give you a few more seconds as some responses are coming in. And again, this is related to your service assignment, which hopefully is exciting. We always love to see how excited members are to serve and to accomplish tasks. About 5 more seconds as some responses are wrapping up. And yes, I agree with Rick in the chat. Don't be afraid to ask questions of your supervisor. Agreed. So we'll close the poll. And sometimes you may have questions for your supervisor specifically about your assignment. So again, almost everyone understands the tasks in their VAD. About 3/4 of people know where to go to find resources to support their service tasks. And about half of the respondents understand what tasks previous VISTA members have accomplished. So this is great. So as we're talking about your clarifying your assignment, and this is being our last strategy, it may seem pretty obvious, but it's really important for you to be clear about what it is you are aiming to accomplish and to be clear from your supervisor about what it is they expect you to accomplish. So there are several things that'll really help you understand and plan your year of service. Each VISTA member has a VISTA assignment description or VAD that your site put together in advance to be provided to VISTA member. So first, you want to make sure that you fully understand what your VAD is asking you to do. As several people said in the chat, ask lots of questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Make sure you take good notes. Highlight or underline keywords as you see fit, words that strike you as powerful and words that you're like, I don't know what this word means. Because the VAD is your roadmap for the year. And remember, most VADs have changed at some point in the year based on new information or new opportunities that have shifted toward. That's normal. And I'm sure it'll happen to most of you. That's what happens in our work, whether you're a VISTA or an executive director. But it's still smart to take a deep look at your VAD early on in the year and really sketch things out. What are some of your ideas? What does your timeline look like? What are things that you need to prepare for before launching later into your year? Devote a lot of time with your VAD and have strong communication with your supervisor to help clarify your assignment. Another helpful item that many of you will have are legacy notes, or some people may call it a legacy binder, from previous VISTA members. If you never had a VISTA at your site, maybe you're the first VISTA at your project, you won't have any legacy notes, unfortunately, but you should make sure that you take really good notes for any potential VISTA members that may come after you. Legacy notes are just a formal binder or computer folder, since a lot of things are electronic now, that have important information for people who come after you, whether it's a VISTA member or the community taking on the project. Things like, what's the phone number to that community partner you worked with? Or where did that grant funding come from this year? What tools did you use to plan your big event? These and all things like this really help someone who comes after you to pick up where you left off. And if you have these type of notes, these may be called legacy notes in your organization. They are a big help when planning out your year. Finally, you all know that the VISTA program has a ton of resources for you. And thank you to those of you who have already shouted out the VISTA campus in the chat. Awesome. The VISTA campus is where you can go if you need something. There really are a lot of resources and tools, and we continue to add new online courses that we sometimes call e-courses or e-learning courses. We also add resources throughout the year. So starting with your recommended early service coursework and continuing through monthly webinars like this one, online e-courses, and other in-person in-service training, VISTA provides you a ton of tools to be successful and really help you understand your year. So we know that each of these may not be appropriate for you, your situation, depending on what tools you need, but the VISTA campus is a really good first place to look for something before you dig any deeper. And then after considering some of these possible actions, we do want to give you a moment to pause and reflect. We know you might need more time than the minute we give you, but think about what additional information you need to clarify and carry out your service tasks. Are there other questions you have? So go ahead and open up your handout and identify one action step that you can take after this webinar specifically related to, excuse me, clarifying your assignment. Again, we'll give you about a minute and play some music, and feel free to share your comments in the chat as well. Okay, thank you for those of you who are responding. I'll read off just a few. I see some comments around we're creating a volunteer manual to help segue from VISTA service to the next VISTA. I see some people saying their VISTA assignment description has already changed. Yes, exactly. Sometimes that happens, but again, part of that is all part of the process of clarifying your assignment. If your VAD does change, you still want to ask your supervisor what has changed and ask them to clarify what new things you're being asked to do. Organization is looking for more information that helps the VISTA and the VISTA project work towards sustainability together. See a few action steps around scheduling a meeting with my supervisor to look at my VAD in detail and to assess my progress. This all relates to clarifying your assignment, but also making sure that you're following what the VAD is asking and making sure that you understand all the nuances of what is being asked. Sometimes you may see some words in the VAD that seem like they make sense, but there could be a larger context. So it's very, very important to clarify what specifically it is that you'll be doing. Yeah, it looks like most of the remaining questions all relate to connecting with the supervisor. And again, just checking to make sure that the VAD is something that you understand and can follow along with. So thank you for sharing those, and please keep adding those in the chat. So here's a summary of some of the resources that are provided in your handout, and we do recommend you look at these for further study. I do want to ask you though, are there any other resources that you all have found helpful when getting started? Feel free to share those in the chat as we continue. There may be resources that you have or someone else wants to share with you, but feel free to share in the chat any other resources that you found helpful when getting started in your service. And then as we wrap up, I do want to make sure that you're thinking about your year of service, not just as a support to your community, but as an investment in yourself as well. The experience, the resources, and the skills that you build in your year of service will serve you in both your personal and professional life forever. You really should be reflecting on what you'd like to learn and take away from your year of service. Then take action to ensure that you get it. As with most things in your year, a lot of that starts with your supervisor. So let them know what you'd like to accomplish, but also ask for their help in doing so. Having a successful start and learning about professional communication are great tools for your toolbox. Chris and I both want to say thank you so much for giving a year of service to your community. We know that you don't get the recognition that you deserve, and sometimes it doesn't come when you want it or maybe when you need it most. And you may be thinking, I'm not even sure if I made the right choice to take on this challenge. But please stick with it. I can tell you your service is valuable. It is making a difference. So keep up the good work and keep making a big difference in this world. Chris, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Eric. And yes, I definitely would reiterate Eric's words, some great words. Your service is appreciated and what you're doing does matter. Sometimes I feel like you don't get thanked enough. So thank you for your service. But yeah, as we're wrapping up here, we do have a final review question for you today related to the topic. So a poll is now appearing on your screen, and please just take a moment to select the correct answer. So which of the below is an important action step for making connections and building relationships at your service site? So specifically, an action step for connections and relationships. And you see the four response options: identify where to find the VISTA member handbook, establish a routine one-to-one meeting with your supervisor, create a community asset map, identify needed resources to support your service tasks. So all four of those could be helpful items to do at your site, but which one is important for connections and relationship building? It looks like maybe half have responded, so we'll give it another 10 to 15 seconds. Make sure everyone gets a chance. See some responding in the chat. Yeah, if for any reason you can't access the poll, feel free to drop your answer in the chat. All right, looks like it's slowing down a little bit, but I do still see some coming in. So do a little drum roll. We are going to close it out. All right, let's take a look at the answer. Now, the correct answer here is B, establish a routine one-to-one meeting with your supervisor. That was specific to the building relationships and connections at your site. Healthy Amounts mentioned the creating a community asset map. Yes, obviously that's a valuable thing to do at your site. That would go towards a different strategy, more on the strengths and assets at the site. So totally understandable that you would use select that response, but the correct answer here for relationships and connections, we hope you will get a routine one-to-one meeting with your supervisor if you have not done so already. We definitely recommend that as an action step if you don't have that set up yet. Okay, before we get to Q&A, just like to shift gears and ask that you offer your feedback on this webinar. Your input is very valuable to us. We review the content and your feedback, and it helps us to determine how we can improve this presentation in the future, what worked, what didn't work, maybe some ideas for future topics. So your input is very valuable, and we just ask that you take a couple moments. It's a pretty quick short survey. We'll share a link in the chat. Yes, Tessa just did. Thanks, Tessa. Um, and it also should pop up in your browser as you exit as well. But thanks in advance for sharing your feedback. And now we'll turn it over to a little Q&A and see what questions have come in. And friendly reminder, if you have some questions, please feel free to submit those using the Q&A function at the bottom. And we'll try to get to all of them if possible. Well, I say that, but let me open this up and see what we have so far. Eric, do you identify one that's for the greater good that we can address?
I think there's one or two. I'll take one that is kind of general, and basically the question is asking if I'm serving as a VISTA member at my site and I'm not always at my site, maybe I'm teleserving or there's a lot of meetings and I'm not physically at my site a lot of time because of all the other work related to VISTA. How do I discover any assets from my host organization? And I think it's a fairly easy answer. One, it's actually been posted in the chat a lot. Definitely chat with your supervisor. Hopefully, your supervisor or someone they can put you in contact with has been at the organization for a while and can really help identify many of those assets and share them with you. I would think that's probably the first and the easiest step. The second is you can always reach out to someone at the organization, whether it's your supervisor or someone else, and ask to learn a little bit more about the organization. Certainly, as a VISTA member, you have a VISTA assignment description and you want to clarify it and make sure you're on the right track. But sometimes, in order to do that, it's helpful to have a larger perspective, whether it's at your orientation or throughout your service, as to what the organization has and what resources already exist so that you know how you can enhance what they're doing and build capacity off of that. So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Eric. See another good question from Elena about, okay, so this is a good question and it does come up. So what should I do if I know some items in my VAD are inaccurate given information my site supervisor gave me? So great question, Elena. And it's important to know that your VAD can and really should be updated as needed. So in your situation, Elena, I don't know if that means that your VAD has some activities or objectives, that you aren't undertaking at your site as part of your active daily activities, or the opposite could be true where you're doing a lot of items at your site, but they aren't included in your VAD, but they should be. So either way, that's something, definitely bring it up with your supervisor. If you already have, and maybe they don't see it as important as you do to update the VAD, you can always contact your AmeriCorps regional office because they're the ones who approved your initial VAD, your VISTA assignment description. When your project applied to have a VISTA member, they had to put that VAD together. So they were approved based on the information that is in your VAD, and we want that to be accurate. And we want, it's going to help you out if it's accurate. So, definitely, if you have any questions and want to reach out to, AmeriCorps staff, you can reach your AmeriCorps regional office. It's pretty easy to remember. It's the state initials at AmeriCorps.gov. So, an example is if you're serving in Texas, it would be TX at AmeriCorps.gov. If you're serving in New York, NY at AmeriCorps.gov, so on and so forth. There's also a list of that on AmeriCorps.gov. But even if you forget that and you can't remember how to contact them, just contact the VMSU. They will let you know and put you in contact with your portfolio manager. But great question there.
And then Chris,
Um,
there's just one final one that I think is very quick, and it's a good reminder was the companion handout that we've been talking about throughout the webinar. Do we need to turn this in, or does submitting our responses in the chat suffice? Great question. You do not need to turn that handout into us. You don't need to turn it into your supervisor, although you may want to share it with your supervisor depending on your comments. But that handout is just for you to track your progress, to follow along with the webinar, but also to use throughout your service because there may be other action items that you identify and you can check them off. So you don't need to turn it in, but thank you in advance for those of you who have shared in the chat, just so we can collaborate together in this webinar.
Thanks, Eric. And yeah, that please continue to submit questions if you'd like. We'll continue to answer those in the Q&A. But given the time, we're coming up towards the top of the hour. We just do want to wrap things up. And a friendly reminder, so this is a common question that comes in is, yes, we are recording this and we will be posting this to the Vista campus likely tomorrow. And once it's posted there, to access the materials, you just need to log in and locate the learning path. So once you're logged in, you can click catalog where you see the red square popping up. That will bring you to the available learning paths. Today's webinar will be posted under the My Professional Development learning path. So you can search for this, or you can filter. There's a filter feature on the left-hand side. You can filter by members to look for that learning path. If it's your first time accessing it, you'll have to enroll and join it, and that just takes a couple of steps. Once you've joined the learning path, you can browse through the available recorded webinars at your leisure. There's a lot of great ones, especially in this My Professional Development learning path. Several great webinars that can be helpful. But we want to thank you for attending today, and we also hope you can join us for our next webinar coming up in just about 3 weeks, I believe, on designing effective surveys. That'll be on Wednesday, November 13th. It'll be at the same time that this webinar started, so 3 p.m. Eastern Time or 12 noon Pacific Time. We hope you will be there. We'll drop a link to register. Yes, Tessa just dropped a link in the chat where you can register. Or if you want to register later, you can go to the calendar on the Vista campus. So if you just, log into the Vista campus, click on calendar from the main menu, a blue or green dot will indicate an event for that day. So if you go to November 13th, click on it, you'll see the description appear below the link once clicked and the link to register. So we certainly hope to see you there. And again, thank you for your participation today. Some really great chat responses. And your participation in the poll questions and just your suggestions in general in the chat are helpful, not only for the webinar itself, but for your fellow colleagues to see some of those responses. So it's really appreciated. I would definitely second Eric's response from earlier too, that just your service is appreciated. And please know that you're respected and appreciated, and we thank you for your service. Now, this will conclude our webinar. If you have a pending question in the Q&A, we'll hang on for a couple minutes to answer those. But if not, feel free to log off, and we hope to see you next month. But thanks all.